Story 1. Mother-in-law told me to hand over my son to her after my husband passed away in an accident. But I said no. The next day, my boy went missing, so I told the cops. Now she's charged with kidnapping. I, 32F, am an orphan. I've been told that my mother abandoned me at a fire station when I was just a baby. I don't even know my real birthday and have never met or tried to find out anything about my birth parents. My upbringing has been far from conventional, as I grew up without a family, bouncing between various orphanages. However, things changed when I turned 11 years old. A childless couple named Mr. and Mrs. Williams, by the way, I have made up these names as well as all other names, so hopefully, no one can find them, had come to our orphanage to look at potential children to adopt. Somehow, they selected me, and Mrs. Williams seemed very enthusiastic to adopt me. The paperwork took some time, but when things were finalized, I thought my life would change for the better. It was a strange feeling to finally leave an orphanage and go with them to their house. Mr. and Mrs. Williams were quite well off, and both of them seemed kind to me, at least in the very beginning. Mrs. Williams was very strict when it came to neatness and would always spank me on my hands if my bedroom was not tidy or if my hair was not properly combed at all times. She would say how she had always had a vision of her daughter being absolutely perfect, and I needed to live up to her expectations. Mr. Williams, on the other hand, was a bit odd. He would always come into my room as an accident while I was changing. As an 11-year-old, I believed his lame excuses, but as I started growing up, I noticed it used to happen more and more. It really made me uncomfortable, so I begged them to let me have a door lock. However, Mrs. Williams refused and told me that everyone's bedroom needs to stay open and accessible at all times. I tried to tell her about Mr. Williams opening the door randomly, and she brushed it off, saying I was just making excuses about her husband so I could have my way. One night, I suddenly woke up feeling really thirsty, but as I opened my eyes, I noticed Mr. Williams standing in my doorway, staring at me. I screamed in fear, and he ran out in a panic. My scream must have woken up Mrs. Williams because she came into my room running, and this is when I told her that her husband had been watching me. I guess my panic expression might have convinced her because she looked furious and went downstairs to talk to her husband, who was tending to watch a football game like he usually does. The next day, she called one of her neighbors to help put up a door lock in my room, and for the first time in a long time, I felt safe. However, she did make me promise to only keep the door locked at night or while I was changing during the daytime, which I happily agreed to. As a child, it was quite difficult for me to understand the deal with Mr. Williams because you have to understand that no one ever taught me that what he was doing was disgusting. All I knew was how it made me feel. I wish I could write that he learned his lesson and changed for the better, but he didn't. Although he could now no longer barge into my room during my vulnerable times, he would ask me uncomfortable questions whenever Mrs. Williams was not around. A woman's intuition is never wrong, and I learned to trust my gut. Hence, whenever Mrs. Williams went out for grocery shopping, I would lock myself inside my room or find an excuse to go outside and spend time with other children in my neighborhood. I guess spending time with other people of my own age group made me realize just how better their life was than mine. They had dads who they could just run to for comfort, and they didn't make them uncomfortable. They had moms who constantly kept checking in on them and brought them snacks or water. Although I knew that I needed to feel grateful that Mr. and Mrs. Williams adopted me and gave me a much better life than the one I had in my orphanage, I still wished every day that I could get love and comfort like other children did so easily. I guess this is why, as I grew up, I got involved with the wrong crowd in school. I was so focused on being accepted by other people that I didn't care much about my reputation. This is how I got involved with drug addicts and meth heads who thought skipping school and not doing homework was fun. I wish I could go back and smack myself on the head, but I guess everything happens for a reason. I would regularly skip classes, get involved with alcohol and drugs, and dress up like a goth to school. Mr. and Mrs. Williams would threaten to kick me out, but I was too rebellious to even care, and we had huge fights for this very reason. Mr. Williams would also be very weird when it came to anyone I was dating. He would glare at them if they ever came to pick me up for dates and would stay up until I came back home. He would also shout at me if I went out in a dress, telling me how I was dressing up like a tease and that I needed to change into what he deemed was more appropriate. He would also have an issue with my long hair and would comment creepy things like how my open hair could excite a boy, so I needed to tie it up in a ponytail. At first, I would keep quiet whenever he commented something like this, but it slowly started to irritate me more and more. I guess this also made me drink more so I could forget how unsafe and uncomfortable I felt in their house. It wasn't until one night when I was coming back from a party after partying all night in the wee hours of the morning that I stood on a bridge and watched the most beautiful sunrise that I had ever seen. I don't know what it was, but it just made me cry and cry. I know this doesn't sound like a dramatic moment, but I understood then that the reason I was being so rebellious is because I hated my life, and I hated everyone and everything in it. If I kept going down this path, then I would one day end up dead like the other alcoholics and meth heads in my town. I knew then that I needed to do something about it. I needed to escape from this town and these people. I can't say that a change happened overnight, but I did stop partying and put my head down and studied. I did lose a lot of friends, but at least my grades improved. Mr. and Mrs. Williams were happy seeing a positive change in me, but I knew I wasn't doing it for them. I was doing this for me. When I finally graduated high school, it felt like I had finally crossed a huge obstacle in my life. Although my grades were not Stanford worthy, they were still good enough for me to join a decent college. However, this is when Mr. and Mrs. Williams showed their true colors. They refused to let me apply to any college out of town. I was shocked since they were the ones who had been pushing me to improve my grades during our fight. Mrs. Williams confessed that the reason they had even thought about adopting someone like me was so that I could feel grateful to them all my life and spend the rest of my days taking care of them. Mr. Williams agreed and went on to say how children are supposed to be built-in caretakers, and this is the least I could do to repay back all the years of money and energy they spent on me. I was speechless after hearing their words. Mrs. Williams didn't just stop there. She went on to say how she had worked so hard and kept me safe from her husband all these years so that I would not find an excuse to just up and leave. She screamed that she made sure to make me docile and disciplined, and that she would not allow me to repay all these years of hard work this way. They even threatened to tear up my high school diploma and burn all my clothes so I would have nothing to take with me and nowhere to go. As you can probably imagine, I was absolutely terrified. If I already had a strong desire to leave before, after that conversation, my determination only grew stronger. In the dead of night, I quietly gathered all my important documents and some clothes, and I made my escape through the window without making a sound. The only thing I left behind was a letter on my bed warning them that if they ever tried to come after me or involve the police, I would make sure Mr. Williams ended up in jail for all the inappropriate things he'd done to me throughout my life. I made it clear that I wouldn't hesitate to share my story with everyone. I didn't have a specific destination in mind, but I had enough money for a bus ticket, and at 18 years old, I knew that I was finally free from my adopted family. I had a friend named Lorraine who had moved to a nearby town, but we had managed to stay in touch over the years. I decided that her place was the only place I could go to, at least until I could come up with a new plan. When I showed up on her doorstep in the early hours of the morning, looking disheveled with my bag, I must have definitely appeared like a runaway, which I was. However, Lorraine and her parents warmly welcomed me inside. She was so excited to see me and could not stop hugging me. Her parents did ask me some questions, seeing all my clothes, and I answered them as truthfully as possible. I guess they must have realized that I had run away from home, but they didn't push me much to tell them everything. I asked them if I could stay with them for the next few days, and they readily agreed. I felt so safe and comfortable at her place. While I stayed with Lorraine in her room, I worked hard to apply to various colleges, trying to focus on building a brighter future every day. In the morning, she and I would apply for colleges and write our essays. Then in the evening, she would take me out to meet her friends in town. We would hike or swim in lakes, and I felt like I could finally breathe in my life. I did wonder how her parents let me stay with them for those months while I applied for colleges. And it wasn't until years later that Lorraine confided in me, revealing that everyone in my hometown already knew about Mr. Williams being a pervert. She told me how he had a record, which I was shocked to learn since I had no idea. However, it did explain why her parents didn't probe too deeply when I showed up on their doorstep that morning. This is why I will always be immensely grateful to Lorraine and her parents for their compassion and for providing me with a safe haven when I needed it most. They truly saved my life that summer. I guess my farewell letter to Mr. and Mrs. Williams must have worked because they have never bothered to contact me all my life since I left. Lorraine and I ended up getting into the same college, so her parents helped us move into our dorm room. I was so glad to see that I had my own bed and desk, which I could decorate as I wished. It was during my college years that I met the love of my life, James. Our connection was undeniable from the very beginning. He was the sweetest guy I had ever met. Talking with him made me feel like I had butterflies in my stomach. We initially became friends until one night when we met out to watch a movie. When he dropped me back to my dorm, he kissed me out of nowhere and we laughed. We stayed out all night just chatting away, and it is still one of my favorite memories. James knew all about my past and never judged me for it. He was furious about how perverted my adopted family was, but was glad that I had cut off all contact with them altogether. He also told me about his family. His mother, Martha, was a single mother for a long time before she met her current husband. Martha had lost her first husband, who was James' father, to a car accident when James was quite young. He told me about how much he loved and respected his mother as he saw her struggle to pay their bills and make sure that he got a good education. I understood his adoration as I was in awe as well with how strong she was after losing her husband and raising their son all on her own. James told me how when he was in high school, Martha finally met Dean, who she would go on to marry, and he was James' stepdad. According to him, they had a good relationship and overall his family life seemed much better than mine. When James and I started to get more serious, he made the decision to take the next big step and introduce me to his mother. Despite visiting the university regularly to see him, she had never had the chance to meet me, so he arranged for us to have dinner at a restaurant near our university, giving me the opportunity to officially meet her. During dinner, I couldn't help but notice that Martha didn't seem too thrilled to meet me. She bombarded me with questions throughout the evening, particularly questions about my family background and childhood. To be honest, I shared with her my experiences of living in different orphanages before being adopted by Mr. and Mrs. Williams. Her lips visibly pursed in disappointment as I told her my story. It was evident that she was not pleased. I attempted to steer the conversation away several times by asking her about how she was doing in her work, but Martha insisted that I should reveal everything about my past since she didn't want to be surprised later. She also persisted in making comments about how she never imagined her son would date an orphan or how James could do much better. Her words cut deep, leaving me feeling uncomfortable and unwelcome. James looked pissed as well and told her several times that her comments were really inappropriate and unfair. But Martha would chime back, saying how she only had his best interest at heart and that mommy knows you best. It's safe to say that I was totally weirded out after meeting her. However, I never grew up in a normal family, so I thought that maybe this was normal for parents to be this protective about their children. I understood that her intentions were positive, and she was just trying to look out for her son. James apologized to me after that dinner and told me that he would talk to his mother about her behavior. Martha and I did meet a few times after that incident, and she tried her best to comment a lot less about my background. Unlike her, Dean, her husband, was really sweet and was always polite to me whenever we met, despite his mother's disapproval. James and I kept going strong, and we both knew we wanted to spend the rest of our lives together. Hence, when we graduated from college, it wasn't really a surprise to me or our friends when James proposed to me. We both had secured excellent jobs and were moving to San Francisco together, where we would be starting our new lives. However, Martha was shocked to say the least and showed her displeasure throughout our engagement party, which we threw for our close friends and James' relatives to attend before our big move to California. While everyone else enjoyed themselves, she stuck out like a sore thumb. At one point, when we were alone, she couldn't contain her shock and disdain, expressing to me privately about how she never imagined her son would end up with someone like me and insinuating that I was just a passing fling for him. Up until that moment, I had always shown her respect, but I also knew I needed to assert myself. I firmly told her that she could not speak to me in such a disrespectful manner again. I reminded her that I was not just James' girlfriend anymore. I was going to be his wife, her daughter-in-law. I acknowledged her disapproval but emphasized that I genuinely loved her son and believed we were good for each other. I made it clear that my past was not my fault, but I was actively working to create a better future for myself and I hoped for her support. In response, she scoffed and declared that I would never have her blessings. Without missing a beat, I calmly replied that I was never asking for them and walked away. She later complained to James after the party about how disrespectful I was towards her, and my fiancé told her that she deserved it since she was always rude to me. It was satisfying watching her face go red in embarrassment. Dean later escorted her out as she yelled at James and me for rushing into getting married and cursing us out. Basically, apart from this incident, our court marriage went quite smoothly. We moved to Cali and lived together in an apartment on rent. Our working hours were long, but every night we would make sure to spend time together as much as possible. I never thought marriage could be so easy, but I guess when you are with the right person, you don't have to try so hard. James and I had discussed our future, and we were clear that we wanted children only after we were financially stable enough to start a family. Hence, in the 4th year of our marriage, when we finally moved into our own place after years of working hard, we both agreed that we could finally start trying for a baby. This house was a result of both our sweat and tears, and we were beyond thrilled at the prospect of welcoming a child into our lives and nurturing them in this space we had built together throughout all the years. Martha had hardly visited us, although Dean would regularly call or text us. Clearly, Martha was still holding a grudge, but everything changed when I finally got pregnant. As soon as she found out the news, she called James to demand that she should move in with us in the final months of my pregnancy, so she could take care of her grandchild, and that she should also be allowed into my delivery room so she could supervise both James and I. We refused all her demands, and James even told her how crazy she was to even ask us for this, which set off yet another fight between them. Martha kept saying how this is what grandparents do for their grandchildren and that if I was a good mother, then I should let her at least watch her grandchild be born in the delivery room. Suffice it to say, my husband handled his crazy mother, and she was not allowed to visit until our son turned 5 weeks old. During this time, I had taken maternity leave while James still worked. However, he would come back every night and do bath time with our son and put him to sleep. We both were tired, but at the same time, being a parent gives you so much happiness. All the love and attention I never received as a child made me a good mother, and I thought I was doing an overall good job. However, when Martha came to visit, her opinion was different. She had complaints about everything, starting with why I was still breastfeeding, why the baby slept separately in the nursery and not with me in the bed, and why I didn't dress my son up this way or that way, which were overall just petty things to point out. She insisted on staying with us for a few weeks, and those weeks were one of the miserable times of my life. She would argue with me about everything and even insisted on putting a baby cam in the nursery so she could keep tabs on the baby at all times. I was exhausted during this time, so I didn't have the energy to argue with her much. However, things quickly worsened over the days when Martha did absolutely nothing to help me around the house. She would not even lift her hands to wash the dishes or fold the laundry. If I was tending to my crying baby and asked her for help with a dish that was being cooked in the kitchen, she would loudly say how nobody helped her when she was raising James and that I needed to do things all on my own. Her presence added an extra burden on me as now I had one more mouth to feed. And she also had issues with my cooking style as she felt cooking just 1 or 2 dishes was not enough to feed her son. I told James that I had had enough, and he asked Martha to leave the very next day, which offended her deeply. She yelled at him about how she deserved to spend time with her grandson and that we could not keep her away from him. When James pointed out that she never even lifted a finger to help me around the house, which is what loved ones generally do when they are visiting new parents, Martha complained that I was being a lousy mother who was not working hard enough around the house, which is why she wanted to teach me a lesson. Suffice it to say that James kicked her out of the house the very next day, despite her protests. After Dean picked her up, she did send me multiple text messages saying how I was the reason for all the discord in her family, and in one of the messages, she even wished that I should have died while giving birth. Her anger and hatred towards me were so strong that James and I discussed and agreed that we needed to go no contact with her immediately. We let Dean know about our intention, and he surprisingly understood. This is why I haven't been in touch with my mill for the past 4 months, and I thought it would remain this way. However, my life turned upside down when I got a call from the hospital saying that my husband had gotten into an accident while riding his bike. At first, my brain didn't work, and I refused to believe that the call was about James. I remember collapsing onto the floor while holding my son, and I felt my body go numb. I knew I needed to go to the hospital, so I called one of my coworkers to come over and watch my son, and she thankfully agreed. I won't go into the details about how I felt when I saw my husband's lifeless body in the morgue, but I did faint because of the excruciating heartbreak. The most painful call I had to make right after identifying his body was to Martha to inform her of her son's death. Her blood-curdling cries of pain still ring in my ears. After finding out the news, my friends and James' relatives rushed over to California as soon as they could to be there for me and my son. We had to organize a funeral, which thankfully my friends took charge of as I was in no state of mind to do anything. I agreed and we stepped out into the backyard. Initially, she expressed her condolences, mentioning how she understood the pain of losing a husband and expressing her wish that I didn't have to endure such grief. However, her tone quickly shifted as she went on to suggest that I was not in the right state of mind to care for my son properly during such a vulnerable time. She boldly proposed that I should allow her to take my son with her so she could raise him away from all the grief and depression surrounding us. I was utterly taken aback, staring at her in disbelief as she continued to justify her proposal by saying that if I was really a good mother, then I should not be selfish enough to hold on to her grandson at such a difficult time. I don't know what came over me, but all the years of pent-up anger and resentment just came flooding out, and I screamed at her to get out of my house. My voice echoed so loudly that guests inside the house turned their heads in concern. My friends rushed to my side, and as I recounted Martha's outrageous demand, they looked at her with a mix of horror and disgust. Martha began to yell back at me, but my friends intervened firmly, escorting her out of the house. They insisted that her behavior toward me was far from normal and urged her to seek professional help. When others found out, they all agreed that maybe Martha was having a mental breakdown after losing her son and that I should just ignore her demands. They all agreed that I should not let her in, and because the house belonged to me now anyway, that night, I kissed my son goodnight and went to bed, still reeling from the grief of losing my husband and shock from his mother's absurd demand. Imagine my shock when I woke up the next day to find my son missing from his crib. I called the police while frantically turning the house upside down in search of my son. It was only when officers arrived at the house and questioned me if I knew someone who could have taken my son while I was sleeping that it clicked. This had to be Martha's doing. She was the only one who had our spare house key, which we had given her years ago in case of an emergency. I recounted the disturbing encounter from the previous day, detailing her shocking demand to take my son without hesitation. The officer sprang into action, dispatching a team to Martha's address. To my immense relief, they found my son there unharmed. However, Martha was swiftly charged and arrested for kidnapping and trespassing. She kept insisting to the officers that it was just a little prank and that she had every right to spend time with her grandson. As you can imagine, this news has gone viral, and people who know me have been calling me in shock. My friends and family recognize Martha from the news, and they can't believe she had the audacity to actually kidnap my son. Although a majority of them agreed that it was right for me to press charges, some of Martha's relatives and her husband, Dean, believe that Martha is going through a tough time, so I should just let this slide. Dean has even promised that he would admit her into a psychiatric hospital so she can get well. So, Reddit, I'm asking for advice. Should I file charges on my mill for taking away my son? Should I let it slide because she has just lost her own son and is probably grieving in her own way? Update 1. I am glad that the majority of people believe that I should not forgive her and that she might not calm down from this incident. I did feel a bit guilty initially when I posted this, but I agree with what most of you have commented, that even my husband, James, would have supported my decision to charge her. That's exactly what I fear, which is why I have no choice but to pursue this. Although I don't want to punish her, I do think that she needs to learn the consequences of her actions. Otherwise, she might do it again to me and my son. As for the relatives who thought that I should just let this slide, I have decided that I'm just going to ignore them and even block them because they never had to go through what I went through as I woke up that morning to find my son missing. Currently, I am working on hiring a lawyer who can help fight this case and present my side of the story effectively to a judge. We'll update soon. Update 2. Hey, I know it has been a month, but I was wrapped up in a lot of things. First of all, I have listened to everyone's advice, and I have changed all the locks in my house. I have also installed a camera on my doorstep and backyard just in case. I did find a lawyer who helped me and my son get a restraining order against Martha for life, so she can never ever come near us. I will admit that this has helped me feel a lot better, and I feel more safe now. My lawyer is confident that we are going to win this case as the facts are pretty much clear. However, it does give me a lot of anxiety. I will update if and when this case gets resolved. Update 3. As promised, I am finally updating y'all about the ongoing case I had against my mill who tried to kidnap my son. These last 7 months have been exhausting, but it seems to have finally paid off. Without going into much detail for legal reasons, my mill has been sentenced to jail for 3 years, as was already expected. She and her lawyer tried their best to come up with a story about how she only had good intentions and was being playful. But thankfully, the judge saw through all that crap and didn't let her actions slide that easily. It also helped that my lawyer showed the judge all the previous text messages that Martha had sent me over the years, which also included the text where she wished that I was dead. Not even once did Martha even glance at me or apologize, even when the judge asked her if she wanted to say something to me before the sentencing. It just makes me glad that I decided to pursue the case against her. At least now, me and my son can sleep at night peacefully. Now on to the next story. Story 2. Before we start, if you're enjoying this video so far, please consider liking and subscribing to the channel. Now let's continue. So I, 28, got married right after college to a super awesome guy named Adam. We have a rock-solid relationship, but things are different with my sister Mia, 24. Mia's been dating this guy Jake since she was 16, and let's just say their relationship is, well, not good. Jake hasn't really got his life together, and honestly, it seems like he wasn't that great from the beginning. Some of my friends even said he got in trouble with the law once, but luckily he got off the hook. Besides being a bit shady, Jake's also involved in some online groups that spread hate, which is definitely not cool. No surprise, none of us, including our parents, like him for Mia, but no matter what we say, she always ends up back with him. It's almost like the more we try to push her away from him, the more she wants to be with him. So yeah, that's the situation. I just want to help my sister, but it's a tricky one. Forbidden fruit tastes the sweetest, if you know what I mean. That's kind of the vibe with my sister Mia and this guy she fell for. Every time I saw them together, it took everything in me not to march up and punch him. Mia was always the cool kid and a super sweet sister to me, but once this dude showed up, it was like she became a different person. Back in the day, Mia was all about experimenting with her look, which was pretty cool to see, but after this guy came into her life, she started changing her style just to match whatever he was into. But that wasn't the worst part. She began spouting off these wild conspiracy theories and really mean stereotypes out of nowhere, especially at dinner. It got us thinking she might even be messing around with drugs. We tried talking to her about it, but she was head over heels for this guy and wouldn't hear a word against him. After a while, I had to accept that Mia was going to live her life her way, no matter what I thought, so I shifted my focus entirely to my own stuff, putting all my energy into college and my future. Now, flipping the page to my own love story with Adam, when we decided to tie the knot, Adam was all in for a super low-key, simple wedding, but me, I've had this dream of an epic wedding since I can remember, something straight out of a fairy tale. And I really wanted to make that dream come true, for me and for my parents. When I shared the news about getting engaged, my folks were thrilled. They've known Adam since we were all in high school, and they've always thought he was the perfect match for me. So the takeaway from all this is, life's a wild ride. We see the people we love making choices we don't always get, and it's hard, but at the end of the day, we've all got our own dreams to chase and lives to live, like planning the perfect wedding or whatever it is that lights up your world. So there I was, in the middle of what felt like a fairy tale. My mom, with her big heart and generous spirit, didn't hesitate for a second when it came to my wedding. She wanted it to be nothing short of magical, the kind of day you look back on and can't help but smile. We were both buzzing with excitement, and before we knew it, we were deep into planning mode. It wasn't just any planning, though. We were crafting what was set to be the happiest day of my life, and my mom was determined to spare no expense. We spent around 4 months poring over every little detail. The venue, the decor, the menu. Every piece had to be perfect. My parents were incredibly supportive, covering the booking amounts and deposits for every vendor. They were planning to cover the full costs, transferring the remaining amounts for the final invoices in the next month or two. Their generosity knew no bounds, and thanks to them, my dream wedding was slowly becoming a reality. But then, about a month before the wedding day, something unexpected happened. I received a call that caught me completely off guard. It was from our caterers, and they sounded a bit anxious. According to them, the payment they were expecting hadn't arrived. I was puzzled to say the least. Confusion quickly turned into concern when I got similar calls from the photographer and then the venue. Each call added to the growing worry in my stomach. What made it all the more baffling was the conversation I'd had with my mom just the day before. We'd been chatting away excitedly, talking about the wedding plans, going over every little detail of how the day would unfold. Everything had seemed fine then, so these calls were like bolts from the blue. How could everything we'd planned so carefully start to unravel so suddenly? As I tried to piece together what was happening, I couldn't shake off the feeling of disbelief. My parents had been so committed to making this day perfect, not just for me, but for all of us. It was hard to imagine any oversight on their part, especially with something as crucial as the wedding payments. This was supposed to be the culmination of months of planning and dreaming, a day where I'd walk down the aisle surrounded by all the love and hard work we'd put into making it happen. Now, with these calls coming in, I was left trying to figure out where things had gone wrong and how to fix them, hoping against hope that my dream wedding wasn't slipping through my fingers. Continuing from where we left off, I was completely taken aback by my mom's explanation. There I was, expecting a simple oversight about payments, but instead, I was hit with a bombshell about my sister Mia. Finding out she was pregnant was shocking enough, but the idea that my parents wanted her to marry Jake, of all people, and use my wedding plans and budget to do it, it felt like I was living in some kind of surreal drama. Trying to process everything, I couldn't help but feel a mix of emotions. My initial shock at the news of Mia's pregnancy quickly turned into disbelief and then frustration. Why Jake? Everyone knew he wasn't good for her, and hijacking my wedding, that was supposed to be my day, the one I'd been dreaming of and planning meticulously with my mom, and now they wanted to just hand it over to Mia and Jake? I tried to reason with my mom, pointing out the impossibility of backing out of the commitments we had made. The deposits, the arrangements, the promises to vendors. We were too far in. Plus, the thought of Jake becoming a permanent member of our family through marriage to Mia was something I couldn't wrap my head around. It just didn't make sense. But my mom's response was firm, almost dismissive. I know it's not ideal, she said, a clear understatement. The pressure for Mia to marry because of the pregnancy, due to our parents' conservative views, was something I understood but didn't agree with. The idea that people will say things seemed like a weak justification for rushing into a wedding that could potentially bind Mia to a life of unhappiness. Then came the suggestions that felt like salt on an open wound. Just use my wedding for Mia. Postpone mine. As if it were a minor detail that could easily be rearranged. The suggestion of a court wedding or attending Mia's wedding as some sort of consolation didn't sit right with me at all. And a double wedding? The thought was absurd considering the circumstances. I was left grappling with a whirlwind of thoughts. The unfairness of the situation was overwhelming. My dream wedding was slipping through my fingers, and the implications for my relationship with my family, especially Mia, were troubling. The idea of having to suck it up and accept this situation was something I couldn't easily come to terms with. The complexity of family dynamics, the clash of expectations, and the sudden shift in plans were a lot to handle, and I found myself at a crossroads, unsure of how to move forward. I was fuming, like steam coming out of my ears. Mad couldn't even get the words out because of how unfair the whole situation felt. Imagine you've been planning the most epic party of your life, your wedding, for months. You've got everything sorted, from the playlist that's just right to the food that'll have everyone talking for years, and then suddenly you're told, hey, guess what? You're going to share this party with your sister Mia. No thanks. Sharing a birthday cake is one thing, but a wedding? That's a whole other level of nope. And let's not even start on the groom-to-be on her side. Let's just say he wouldn't be winning any brother-in-law of the year awards from me. So, in the heat of the moment, I laid it all out. Told my mom that if they went ahead with this circus, they might as well forget my address and lose my number. Yeah, it was that serious. Now, on to the chat with my fiancé Adam. He's the calm to my storm, always trying to see the best in people, but even he was like, "What the heck?" when I told him about the switcheroo. He agreed it was a total blindside for my folks, but thought maybe we should just go see what this was all about, despite how much it stung. And let me tell you, explaining this whole mess to Adam's family was like trying to tell a joke that just doesn't land. Awkward doesn't even start to cover it. But bless them, they were all, "We get it. Stuff happens." In the end, Adam and I tied the knot at the courthouse. Just us. Simple and sweet. But it didn't end there. We managed to pull off a vow renewal ceremony later that was everything I dreamed of and more. As for Mia, her hubby Jake, and my folks, well, I kind of hit the pause button on keeping up with them. Last I heard, Mia was working with Dad, Jake was job hunting still, and my nephew Randall was growing up fast, or so the photos on social media suggested. Now, here's where it gets even juicier. Out of nowhere, a lawyer rings me up. My parents need me to spill the beans on Mia's behavior because she's gone and sued Dad's company. Talk about a plot twist. It's a mess. And I'm sitting here thinking, how on earth could what I say make a dent in this drama? The lawyer's waiting on my decision, but honestly, I'm torn. On one side, I've got this itch of curiosity, wondering what in the world went down. But on the other, I'm over here like, do I really want to jump back into the family soap opera? It's a tough call. Would I be the villain in this story if I chose to stay out of the fray? It's like deciding whether to watch the next episode of a show when you know you should really go to bed. Part of me wants to know, but another part of me is like, nah, I think I'm good. Update 1. Okay, so after the lawyer's call, my dad also got a hold of my number. This was our first phone call in 6 years. But he didn't even acknowledge that at all. So picture this. You haven't talked to your dad in what feels like forever, right? 6 whole years of silence. And then boom, out of the blue, your phone rings, and it's him. But the weirdest part? He acts totally normal, as if you guys were just chatting yesterday. No long time no see or missed you. Nothing. Straight to business. Now on to the juicy bits. The family drama and all the chaos that's been going down while you've been out of the loop. First up, your sister Mia. She's been working at your dad's company, clocking in day after day for 4 years. But here's the kicker. She's stuck in the same spot. No climbing up the ladder for her. It's not like she hasn't tried, but she's really into this whole, I don't want any special treatment because I'm the boss's daughter vibe. So she's been playing it cool, working hard, hoping her efforts speak for themselves. Then there's your brother Jake. Oh boy, where do we start? Jake's been bouncing around, not really sticking to any job for too long. But then he gets this idea in his head that maybe he should work at your dad's company too. You can probably guess how that went down. Your dad was like, no way, not happening. Especially because Jake's been in some trouble. Not the kind that makes a dad eager to hand over a job. But wait, it gets more interesting. Mia, who's usually on her best behavior, starts slipping. She begins dropping these weird comments at work about how the company should hire people just for the sake of looking good, diversity-wise. It's pretty clear she's been picking up some of Jake's less than great ideas. Despite being the boss's kid, she doesn't get a free pass from everyone else. They start whispering, side-eyeing, and it's not long before the whole office vibe shifts. No one's confronting her directly because, well, she's the boss's daughter, but the tension? You could cut it with a knife. The drama hits its peak when someone from the company decides to spill the tea on Instagram. They make a post blasting the toxic work environment. And while they don't name names, it's super obvious they're pointing fingers at Mia and her antics. It's like watching a scene from a show where everything explodes, and you can't wait to see what happens next. So there you have it. A full-on saga of family drama, work troubles, and a whole lot of awkwardness, all coming to light after years of silence. It's like catching up on a soap opera you didn't know you were a part of. The whole thing kicked off when someone decided to air our dirty laundry on Instagram, of all places. It was like lighting a match in a room full of gas. Everything just exploded. The guy who posted it couldn't handle the fallout and bounced, leaving a giant mess in his wake. With him gone, my dad had no choice but to finally deal with Mia's antics. And by deal with, I mean he fired her. Mia, finding herself in hot water and desperate because, let's face it, Jake's contribution to the family income is a big fat zero, decides to go for the nuclear option. She hires this lawyer, right, the type you'd expect to see on one of those courtroom dramas, all flashy and no substance, and sues for wrongful termination, claiming her freedom of speech was trampled on. It's a bold move, especially considering there's an Instagram post floating around that pretty much sums up why she was a nightmare to work with. Meanwhile, Jake's living up to his reputation as the family's black sheep by rallying his online buddies to trash the company's reputation. It's like he's taken up the mantle of chief troublemaker now that Mia's out of the picture. The lawyer thinks I could be the ace up their sleeve, suggesting that if I spill the beans about Mia's history of being a total nightmare, it could prove that her so-called freedom of speech is really just her being her usual troublesome self. So there I am, listening to all this, wondering why in the world I should get involved. It's not like I've been part of the family business or drama for years. I'm living my life, staying out of the drama, and then this bomb lands in my lap. I tell my dad I'll think about it, which is basically me being non-committal, and end the call. Now I'm stuck in this whirlwind of emotions and decisions. Sure, Mia probably deserved what she got, but jumping back into this family drama? Not exactly how I envision spending my time. But here's the kicker. It's not just about the immediate family. I've kept in touch with my extended family, and they're all tuning into this drama like it's their favorite Netflix series. They're completely split on what I should do. Half of them are like, stay out of it. You've done so well keeping your peace. Why dive back into the mess now? And honestly, they have a point. I've spent years building a life away from this kind of drama. The other half, they're on the just help out this one-time train. They think I should just testify, help shut this whole circus down, and then retreat back to my drama-free existence. It's tempting, in a way, to think that I could just dip my toes in, help out, and then bounce, but we all know life's never that simple. So here I am, trying to weigh my options. Do I get involved, testify, and potentially help put an end to this chapter of our family's saga? Or do I keep my distance, focus on my own life, and let them figure it out on their own? It's a tough spot to be in. On one hand, part of me feels like I could be the one to help bring some resolution to this mess. On the other, why should I have to clean up a mess I didn't make? It's like being stuck between a rock and a hard place, trying to decide whether to step into the arena or stay in the stands. And the more I think about it, the more I realize that no matter what I choose, it's going to be a significant moment. This decision could redefine my relationship with my family, for better or worse. As I mull it over, it feels like I'm on the verge of a major turning point, and whichever path I choose, there's no going back. It's a heavy weight to carry, knowing that my next move could either mend fences or burn bridges. Update 2. The situation got sorted out without needing to go to court. I'm not super clear on all the details, but it looks like things have been decided for me. Haha. This whole drama kind of wrapped up without us having to step into a courtroom. To be honest, I'm a bit fuzzy on all the specifics, but it seems like the universe has made the choice on my behalf, which is kind of funny when you think about it. So here's what went down. At first, I was all caught up in the excitement, you know? It felt like something straight out of a TV show, with all these intense discussions and everyone having an opinion on what I should do. But then I started having these long chats with some friends of mine, not family, just friends who can be real with me. We'd sit down, grab a pizza or something, and just talk it out for hours. And the more we talked, the clearer it became. There was this one night, for example, when we were all hanging out at my place, just chilling, and the topic came up again. We went through everything from the what-ifs to the maybes and the buts. It was like one of those movie scenes where the main character has their big moment of realization, and let me tell you, it was eye-opening. The drama was intense. I mean, there were moments when I felt like I was in the middle of a storm, trying to navigate my boat through these huge waves, but as the discussions went on, and as I heard more outside perspectives, it started to dawn on me. Getting involved in this whole court thing would be like inviting a hurricane into my life, and honestly, I'm not about that life. I realize that peace of mind is like this precious gem, and once it's gone, it's really hard to get it back. So, after all those talks, all the drama, and the emotional roller coaster, I came to a decision. I was like, nah, I'm good. I'll sit this one out. And looking back, I genuinely feel it was the best call. It's like I dodged a bullet. Now I can just kick back, focus on keeping my vibe chill, and enjoy life without that extra stress. Who knew that sometimes not jumping into the fray is actually the bravest thing you can do? Update 3. So here's the thing. Gather around because I've got this wild update to share with you all. It's about that whole drama with the court case that suddenly disappeared into thin air. You won't believe what I found out the other day. I was just hanging out, not doing much, when my cousin decides to drop by. We're just shooting the breeze, talking about this and that, and out of nowhere he starts talking about Erica and how she supposedly hit the jackpot. My ears perked up because, come on, who doesn't want to know more about jackpot stories, right? I'm all curious now, so I ask him, what do you mean by hit the jackpot? Because I'm thinking maybe she won the lottery or something equally crazy. But no, the story takes a wild turn. He leans in a bit and says, well, you know your mom and dad, they've been playing this huge prank on Erica. And I'm like, what kind of prank? Because my parents aren't exactly known for their pranking skills. He tells me that every single month, without fail, my mom and dad have been secretly sending Erica money. Just like that. No big confrontation, no complicated schemes, just plain old monthly payments, as if they're her personal ATM or something. And the reason? It's all to get her to drop the lawsuit and just move on with her life. Honestly, the more I think about it, the funnier it gets. It's like they're sponsoring a 24-year-old woman and her husband for no reason at all. Now I'm sitting there trying to wrap my head around this. It's like, on one hand, it's absolutely hilarious because seriously, who does that? But on the other hand, it's kind of genius in a very odd way. My parents, in their own weird way, figured out how to make the problem go away without any more drama. They basically turned into these undercover benefactors, supporting Erica and her husband out of the blue. Looking back on the whole situation, it's just so out there. I mean, supporting someone like that just to get them to back off? And the funniest part is, it actually worked. Erica got her money, dropped the case, and everyone moved on. My parents definitely got themselves into a unique situation. But hey, they managed to navigate through it in their own peculiar way. And now we've got this hilarious story about how they secretly financed Erica to keep things smooth. It's one for the books, and every time I think about it, I can't help but laugh at the sheer absurdity of it all. Update 4. So after the whole courtroom drama settled down, with Mia getting a monthly allowance from my parents, which, let's be honest, is the kind of plot twist you can't even make up, things seemed to quiet down, or so I thought. Adam and I were finally getting into a good groove, enjoying the married life without the shadow of family drama looming over us. That is, until the unexpected happened. Mia shows up at our doorstep, unannounced, and looking like she's been through a storm. Jake is nowhere in sight, and she's got Randall, who's now a toddler, in her arms. She starts off with how things have spiraled out of control since the lawsuit. Apparently, Jake had gotten himself involved with some even shadier online groups, and things had taken a turn for the worse. He was now under investigation for some serious allegations, and Mia was at her wit's end. She had finally left him, but with no job and a child to care for, she was out of options. I'm torn between the satisfaction of an "I told you so" moment and the residual sisterly instinct to protect her. Adam, ever the peacemaker, suggests we let her stay for a couple of days while she figures things out. Those couple of days turn into weeks, and Mia is slowly starting to get back on her feet, attending job interviews and looking into daycare options for Randall. Just when things seem to be looking up, my parents get wind of Mia staying with us and decide it's their cue to waltz back into my life, acting as if nothing ever happened. They're full of apologies and excuses, trying to mend fences, but it's clear they're also here to try and take control of Mia's situation. The twist? Mia doesn't want their help. She's determined to stand on her own 2 feet, refusing to be dependent on them again. This causes a huge argument where years of pent-up grievances are aired out, accusations fly, old wounds are reopened, and in the midst of this chaos, I find myself playing the role of mediator. Through all this, Adam and I have our own news that we've been hesitant to share, given the circus our life has become. We're expecting our first child. We'd imagined sharing this news under happier circumstances, but somehow, amidst the arguing, it slips out. The room goes silent. Suddenly, the focus shifts, and for a brief moment, there's a sense of unity and joy. My parents, Mia, even Jake, who somehow heard the news and decided to make an appearance, albeit awkwardly, are all congratulating us. But the drama isn't over. Mia, inspired by our news, decides it's time for her to make some changes. She announces she's moving out, has found a job, and is enrolling Randall in daycare. She wants to provide a stable life for her son, away from the chaos of our family's drama. As for my parents, this whole ordeal seems to have been a wake-up call. They start taking steps to fix their relationship with both Mia and me, understanding that their actions have consequences. It's a slow process, but it's a start. Adam and I, amidst all this, are just trying to navigate our way through the unexpected turns our life keeps taking. We're excited about our growing family, but are also cautious, knowing that with our family, peace is often fleeting. The drama continues, but there's a sense of hope that maybe, just maybe, we're on the path to healing and rebuilding the family dynamics. But as anyone who's been following this saga knows, in our family, you never know what's around the corner. Now on to the next story. Story 3. I refused to attend my daughter's graduation after she chose to live with my ex-husband and his affair partner. I told her this on her graduation day. I, 42F, have been divorced from my ex-husband, Mark, 45M, for 5 years now. We were married for 15 years before I found out he was cheating on me with a coworker, Sarah, 38F. The discovery of the affair was devastating, and it tore our family apart. At the time of our divorce, our daughter, Emily, was 13. Despite my attempts to keep things civil for her sake, the divorce was messy and painful. Mark moved out of our family home and in with Sarah almost immediately after I confronted him about the affair. This made things even more difficult for Emily, who was already struggling to cope with the sudden changes in her life. During the divorce proceedings, we had to discuss custody arrangements for Emily. I wanted joint custody, thinking it would be best for her to maintain a relationship with both parents. However, Emily surprised us all by expressing her desire to live primarily with Mark. She said she felt more comfortable with him and Sarah, and that their new home felt more stable than ours did at the time. I was heartbroken by Emily's decision. I couldn't understand how she could choose to live with the man who had betrayed our family and the woman who had helped him do it. I tried to talk to Emily about it, to explain my side of things, but she was adamant. She said she didn't want to take sides, but she felt like Mark and Sarah's home was a better environment for her. The court granted Emily's wish, and she moved in with Mark and Sarah. I was given visitation rights, but Emily rarely wanted to spend time with me. When she did come over, things were tense and awkward. She would often cut our visits short, saying she had plans with Mark and Sarah or her friends. What hurt the most was hearing Emily call Sarah Mom. It happened about a year after the divorce. I had picked Emily up for one of our rare outings, and as we were leaving, she turned to Sarah and said, "Bye, Mom. I'll see you later." I felt like I had been punched in the gut. When I tried to talk to Emily about it later, she brushed it off, saying that Sarah was more of a mom to her now than I was. Over the next few years, my relationship with Emily continued to deteriorate. She became more distant, often canceling our plans at the last minute or not showing up at all. When we did spend time together, she would talk endlessly about how great Mark and Sarah were, how much fun they had as a family, and how happy she was living with them. Felt like she was deliberately trying to hurt me. I tried to maintain a relationship with Emily, but it was hard. Every time I saw her, I was reminded of the life I had lost and the family that had been taken from me. I started to withdraw, protecting myself from the pain of rejection. I still sent birthday and holiday gifts, but our interactions became less and less frequent. Now, Emily is 18 and about to graduate from high school. Last week, she called me out of the blue. It was the first time we had spoken in months. She told me about her upcoming graduation and said she wanted me to attend. She said it would mean a lot to her if I could be there to celebrate this milestone with her. I was surprised by the invitation but also hesitant. I asked Emily if Mark and Sarah would be there, and she said, yes, of course they would be. She added that they were planning a big celebration after the ceremony and that I was welcome to join them. The thought of sitting through the graduation ceremony, watching Emily accept her diploma while Mark and Sarah cheered her on, made me feel sick, and the idea of attending a party at their house, surrounded by their friends and family, seemed like torture. I told Emily that I appreciated the invitation, but I didn't think I could attend. Emily got upset. She accused me of being selfish and said I was punishing her for choices she made when she was just a kid. She said she was trying to make things right between us, and that by refusing to come to her graduation, I was showing her that I didn't care about her or her achievements. I tried to explain that it wasn't about not caring for her, but about protecting myself from a painful situation. I told her that seeing her with Mark and Sarah celebrating as a family would be too difficult for me. I suggested that maybe we could have our own celebration, just the two of us at a different time. Emily wasn't having it. She said if I really loved her, I would put aside my feelings and be there for her on this important day. She said my refusal to attend proved that I was the one who had abandoned her, not the other way around. Then she hung up on me. Since then, I've been bombarded with messages from Mark, Sarah, and even some of Emily's friends, all telling me how selfish and cruel I'm being. They say I'm putting my own feelings ahead of my daughter's needs and that I'm ruining what should be a happy time for her. Part of me feels guilty. I know graduation is a big deal, and I hate the thought of disappointing Emily. But another part of me feels angry and hurt. Where was all this concern for my feelings when Emily chose to live with Mark and Sarah? When she started calling Sarah Mom? When she consistently prioritized her relationship with them over her relationship with me? I feel like I'm being asked to pretend that the last 5 years didn't happen, to smile and play happy families for the sake of Emily's big day. But I'm not sure I can do that without completely breaking down. The thought of watching Emily celebrate with her new family, the family that replaced me, makes me feel physically ill. Should I suck it up and go for her sake, even if it causes me significant emotional pain? Or am I right to protect myself from a situation that I know will be incredibly difficult for me? Update. After my last post, I spent a lot of time thinking about Emily's graduation. The pressure from everyone was intense, and I felt torn between protecting myself and being there for my daughter. In the end, I decided to attend both the ceremony and the celebration at Mark and Sarah's house. I realized I had been equally bearing Emily's educational expenses all these years, despite the cold treatment I received. This fact gave me the strength to face the difficult situation. On the day of the graduation, I arrived at the school auditorium early. I chose a seat near the back, hoping to avoid any awkward interactions with Mark and Sarah. As the ceremony began, I watched Emily walk across the stage to receive her diploma. She looked beautiful and confident. For a moment, I felt a surge of pride, quickly followed by a wave of sadness for all the moments I had missed. After the ceremony, I made my way to Mark and Sarah's house for the celebration. The house was decorated with balloons and banners, and there were already many people there when I arrived. I felt out of place and uncomfortable, but I reminded myself why I was there. Emily seemed surprised to see me. She came over and gave me a quick, awkward hug. Mark and Sarah nodded in my direction but didn't approach me. I could feel the tension in the air as the party went on. I watched Emily laugh and joke with her friends and with Mark and Sarah. They looked like a perfect family, and I felt like an outsider. The pain I had been carrying for years bubbled up inside me. Finally, I couldn't take it anymore. I asked Emily if we could talk privately for a moment. She hesitated but agreed, and we stepped out onto the back porch. I took a deep breath and told Emily that I had something important to say. I explained that for the past 5 years, I had been equally sharing her educational expenses with Mark. I told her that despite the way she had treated me, I had continued to support her financially because I wanted the best for her. Then I dropped the bombshell. I said that moving forward, I would no longer be contributing to her educational expenses. I explained that I had made this decision because I felt that my financial support was taken for granted, just as my role as her mother had been. Emily's face went pale. She asked me if I was serious, and I confirmed that I was. I told her that actions have consequences and that she couldn't expect me to continue supporting her financially when she had consistently pushed me away emotionally. Our conversation quickly drew attention. Mark and Sarah came over, demanding to know what was going on. When Emily told them, they were furious. Mark called me selfish and cruel. Sarah said I was punishing Emily for choices she made as a child. Some of Emily's friends overheard and started whispering among themselves. I stood my ground. I calmly explained that I had been supporting Emily financially for years, despite being treated like an outsider. I said that I was not obligated to continue this support, especially when my role as a mother had been so thoroughly dismissed. The party atmosphere completely evaporated. People started leaving, casting disapproving glances my way. Emily was in tears, accusing me of ruining her graduation day. Mark was red-faced with anger, telling me I should leave. Sarah stood with her arm around Emily, glaring at me. I left the party feeling a mix of emotions. Part of me felt guilty for causing a scene at Emily's graduation celebration, but another part of me felt relieved. For years, I had been silently bearing the pain of rejection while still providing financial support. It felt liberating to finally stand up for myself. The next few days were quiet. I didn't hear from Emily or anyone else. I assumed they were all still angry with me. I tried to focus on my own life, telling myself that I had done the right thing by being honest about my feelings and decisions. About a week after the graduation, I received a call from Emily. I was surprised to see her name on my phone screen. When I answered, I could hear that she was crying through her sobs. Emily explained that she had just had a conversation with Mark about her college expenses. She said that Mark had told her he couldn't fully support her education because Sarah was pregnant. He said he needed to look after Sarah and save money for the baby. Emily went on to say that Mark had advised her to look for a job to help support her educational expenses. She sounded shocked and hurt, as if she couldn't believe her father would do this to her. As I listened to Emily cry, I felt a mix of emotions. Part of me felt justified. For years, I had been the one making sacrifices while Mark and Sarah played the role of the perfect parents. Now, Emily was finally seeing another side of them. But I also felt sad for Emily. Despite everything that had happened between us, she was still my daughter, and I hated to hear her in pain. I remembered how it felt to have my world turned upside down, to feel betrayed by the people I trusted most. Emily then said something that caught me off guard. She told me that she now understood the sacrifices I had made for her. She said she realized how much it must have hurt me to continue supporting her financially while being pushed away emotionally. I listened quietly as Emily apologized for the way she had treated me over the years. She said she had been young and confused and that she had taken me for granted. She admitted that she had been unfair to me and that she regretted many of her actions. As much as a part of me wanted to comfort Emily and tell her everything would be okay, I knew I needed to maintain the boundaries I had set. I told Emily that I appreciated her apology, but that it didn't change the reality of our situation. I explained to Emily that actions have long-term consequences. I said that while I understood she was young when she made many of her choices, those choices had still deeply hurt me. I told her that trust and relationships take time to rebuild and that a single apology couldn't undo years of rejection. Emily asked if I would reconsider my decision about her educational expenses. She said she now realized how much she had relied on my support and that she was scared about how she would manage without it. I took a deep breath before responding. I told Emily that I couldn't simply pretend the last 5 years hadn't happened. I explained that while I still loved her, I needed to protect myself emotionally and financially. I suggested that she follow Mark's advice and look for a job to support her education. Emily started crying harder at this point. She begged me to help her, saying she didn't know how she would manage college without my support. She said she was sorry for everything and that she wanted to make things right between us. I remained firm in my decision. I told Emily that part of becoming an adult is learning to deal with the consequences of your choices. I said that while I was sorry she was struggling, I couldn't continue to be her financial support when I had been pushed out of her life in every other way. I suggested to Emily that she speak with her school's financial aid office about scholarships or loans. I also recommended that she start looking for part-time work to help cover her expenses. I told her that many students work their way through college and that while it would be challenging, it was not impossible. Emily seemed to realize that I wasn't going to change my mind. Her tone changed from pleading to resentful. She accused me of being cold and uncaring, saying that a real mother would never abandon her child like this. Her words stung, but I stood my ground. I reminded Emily that I hadn't abandoned her. She had chosen to live with Mark and Sarah, to call Sarah Mom, and to push me out of her life. I said that I was simply adjusting my role in her life to match the relationship she had chosen to have with me. Before ending the call, I told Emily that I was open to working on our relationship if she was genuinely interested in doing so. However, I made it clear that any reconciliation would take time and effort on both our parts, and that it wouldn't change my decision about her educational expenses. After I hung up, I sat in silence for a long time, processing the conversation. I felt a mix of sadness, anger, and relief. Part of me wondered if I was being too harsh, if I should give Emily another chance. But another part of me felt like I was finally standing up for myself after years of being taken for granted. Over the next few weeks, I received several angry messages from Mark and Sarah. They accused me of being vindictive and cruel, saying I was punishing Emily for their mistakes. Some of Emily's friends also reached out, telling me I was being a terrible mother. I didn't respond to any of these messages. I knew that no matter what I said, they would twist my words to fit their narrative of me as the bad guy. Instead, I focused on taking care of myself. I started seeing a therapist to work through my feelings about the situation. I also threw myself into my work and my hobbies, trying to build a life that wasn't centered around the pain of my broken family. Emily didn't contact me again for several weeks. When she did, her tone was different. She sounded tired and stressed. She told me that she had found a part-time job and was trying to figure out her college finances. She said it was harder than she had expected and that she was struggling to balance everything. I listened to Emily without offering solutions or support. I told her I was proud of her for taking responsibility for her education. I also reminded her that this was a consequence of her past choices, and that learning to handle difficult situations was part of growing up. Emily didn't ask for money this time, which I appreciated. Instead, she asked if we could start having regular phone calls to stay in touch. I agreed, but I made it clear that rebuilding our relationship would take time and that she shouldn't expect things to go back to normal right away. As the weeks turned into months, Emily and I slowly started to rebuild our relationship. Our phone calls became more frequent and less awkward. Emily shared her struggles with balancing work and school, and I offered advice when she asked for it. She also started to open up about her feelings regarding the past few years, acknowledging the hurt she had caused me. I remained firm in my decision not to financially support Emily's education, but I did start to help her in other ways. I taught her how to budget, helped her look for scholarships, and gave her advice on studying efficiently while working. These interactions felt more balanced and healthy than our previous dynamic. Emily also started to distance herself somewhat from Mark and Sarah. She told me that she had realized how much they had influenced her feelings towards me over the years. She said she was trying to form her own opinions and make her own choices now. As for Mark and Sarah, they eventually stopped trying to guilt me into supporting Emily financially. I heard through Emily that they were struggling with their own issues. Sarah's pregnancy was difficult, and they were facing financial strain. Part of me felt a grim satisfaction at this, but mostly I just felt sad for everyone involved. Looking back on everything that happened, I still believe I made the right choice. It was painful and difficult, but it was necessary for my own well-being and for the possibility of building a healthier relationship with Emily in the future. I've learned that it's possible to love someone while still maintaining boundaries and looking after yourself. The situation with Emily is still evolving. We're not as close as we once were, and I doubt we ever will be again. Too much has happened. Too many hurtful words have been said, but we're finding a new way to relate to each other. One that's based on mutual respect rather than obligation or guilt. I don't know what the future holds for us. I hope that Emily will continue to mature and that our relationship will continue to improve. But I also know that I can't pin all my hopes and happiness on that. I'm learning to find fulfillment in other areas of my life, to be happy with myself regardless of my relationship with Emily. In the end, I've realized that being a good parent doesn't always mean giving your child everything they want. Sometimes it means teaching them hard lessons about consequences and responsibility. And sometimes it means putting your own emotional health first so that you can be the best version of yourself for your own sake and for the sake of any relationship you might have with your child in the future. Now on to the next story. Story 4. Chapter 1. The backstory. My parents aren't exactly on the best of terms. Actually, they haven't been on remotely decent terms for a while now. After their 22-year marriage, they got a divorce back in mid-2013 when I was in 6th grade. The exact dates are a bit hazy, but I'd say it was around April or May of that year. It was quite bitter. I don't think the things my parents said to each other in the courtrooms are appropriate here, but long story short, they effing hated each other after the divorce proceedings started. I live with my mom at our old house. She started spewing a bunch of BS accusations about the fact that your father is the worst human being on the planet, he's corrupting your minds, and a lot more hateful, untrue stuff. But I was only 11, which was way too young to know that it was actually BS. I just blindly accepted it as fact because that's what I'd been more or less raised to do. But this was only the beginning. At this point, the monitored visit started happening. This was at about early to mid-March 2014. Also, if you're wondering why they were monitored, it was because on a scale of 1 to 10, my parents' level of trust in each other was at AUS 1187,000 million. Anyways, for a few hours every Saturday, I was handed off to my dad, and we'd hang out somewhere like K1 Speed or his parents' house. Then I was given back to my mother, and I'd go about my existence as an annoying as hell 11-year-old. Not ashamed to admit it, I was pretty weird then. A plot twist happened, more like a life twist, but you get the idea. Over Thanksgiving break in 7th grade, my dad got full custody of me. I went to live with him in his bachelor pad, and I thought that was that. But my mom was livid. I had to say it. Whenever we had visits, she would try to pull me to the side and tell me not to listen to my dad, to tell him I didn't want to live with him or some other BS. But the monitor would step in because that wasn't allowed, just like the rest of the stuff she did after this point. I continued middle school. My grades got heaps better and monitored visits started again, but this time with my mom only. The visits were a little different, important later. Me and my dad drove to a drop-off point apart, close to my mom's house. I was given to the monitor, then we drove to my mom's house, did stuff, then went back to the drop-off point, and I went back to my dad's place. It was also at this point in my life where I learned to not blindly accept things my parents ate as facts unless it was actually true. Duh. This was because I learned that what my mom said about my dad wasn't true. I started questioning her reasoning, but I didn't tell anyone. In hindsight, I should have. I didn't really know who to trust more or who to listen to. Life was somehow as normal as it could have been for someone in my situation. That is, until Monday, April 6, 2015. Maybe all this wouldn't have happened if it wasn't a Monday. I think to myself in my fevered imagination. Chapter 2. The part where it gets interesting. On this fateful day was when everything got turned completely upside down. First, it was just like any other Monday visit. I went to her house, only she wasn't waiting on the porch as usual. She was in front of her house in her car. I thought, okay, that's a little weird, and thought nothing of it. When the monitor pulled into the driveway with me in the back seat, my mom pulled forward and blocked the monitor's car in. When we got out of the car, she was yelling at me to get in the car, which I stupidly did because I didn't know any better. The monitor rushes over and says, "You can't do this. This is against the rules." My mother responds with, "No, I'm protecting him from his terrible father," or something along those lines. I don't know. I was in the car and couldn't hear. Apparently, from what I learned later on, she physically assaulted the monitor before getting in the car and driving off. As we pulled away, I don't remember exactly what she said, but it was probably something like, "We are going to start a better life for ourselves somewhere where we can forget all our problems and start over," or some other BS. We get to LAX about a half an hour after the visit was scheduled to end, and she asked me where I want to go. I say Washington, D.C. because I'd never been there before, but we ended up hitching a flight to Chicago for some reason. I will never forget what I said to myself as we took off. There goes my life as I know it. And wouldn't you know it, I was right. When we landed, we were called off the plane and detained for questioning. My mother and I were put in separate rooms, but the whole time I could hear her repeating, "I had to do what I had to do to protect my son." I got no sleep that night because those words were haunting me the whole time. The next day, I was sent on a solo flight back to LAX. That was my first time flying alone, But before I left, my mother said to me, "When you get there, tell your father that you don't want to live with him anymore." Deep down, I knew that the proper course of action was electing to ignore that stupid decision. But me being the idiot 12-year-old I said I'd do that. Like a liar. On the way back home from LAX, my dad told me that the incident had made the news, and the clip that he showed me, my dad summed it up perfectly. It's worse than hell. I don't know what hell is like, but this is it for me. The next day at school, everyone was like, "Whoa, what the heck happened? We saw you on the news last night and thought you died." And in some twisted way, they were right. For the next few years, my mom would be in and out of jail for repeated violations of a court-ordered restraining order because she kept trying to sign me out of school. I'll never forget how old I was when she did this for the first time. But as the years went on, she did this throughout my freshman, sophomore, and junior years. I became sort of uncomfortably numb to her repeated special guest appearances in my life. The last straw was when she showed up at my house over this past summer. Not once, not twice, but on 3 distinct occasions. Now it was my turn to be levied on a court-mandated Skype call on a Tuesday night with my mom's older sister and her mom, who are unlike my birth giver, Cyan. My mom kept poking her head in, trying to see me. At that point, I'd had just about enough and I exploded. I finally called her out on her BS. In hindsight, there were some other things I should have said, and maybe some stuff I shouldn't have said, but that night was one of the best of my life. I finally felt that I had a sense of closure, and that she finally understood how she was affecting me, except for the fact that she didn't understand. That Saturday, me and my dad spotted her on the main road next to my house again. We immediately reported it to the police, and she was picked up soon after. She currently resides in jail. Chapter 3, Epilogue. The ending to this debacle is somewhat of a bittersweet one. Sweet because she'll be in jail for the rest of my senior year, and thus I don't have to worry about her showing up again. The bitter part is having to figure out how to prepare for when she's eventually let out and the aftermath that may or may not ensue shortly thereafter. It's, well, a debacle more than anything, but it's life. Not a good life, but life nonetheless. My dad and his girlfriend have been extremely supportive of this matter, and I can't thank them enough. As for me, I've been trying to live my best life, and after a significant bout of depression and a suicide attempt, I feel like I'm coming out on top. If you read this, which I doubt you will, you Mom Opie, the main thing I got out of this story is that you've got to stop beating yourself up. You can't blame yourself for making dumb decisions when you're 8 or 10 or 12 or whatever because you were 8 or 10 or 12 or whatever. People that young can't possibly be expected to make adult decisions. That's why they've got adults in their lives who are supposed to make those decisions for them. So I'm glad you're finally out of that situation, but honestly, you have got to stop blaming yourself because what happened to you was not your fault. Now on to the next story. Story 5. This story takes place somewhere in the late 90s, early 2000s. Backstory. My mom was in an accident when she was 14 and lost her right arm. She has about 1/4 of that arm left that she calls her stub. And to be honest, the loss hasn't done much to derail her. She drives. She has a joystick thing which sticks out of the wheel, and she turns it like she's doing a shave. She calls it her knob loudly and in public. She worked for a long time until she started having issues with the arm she does have, and she's generally been the person in the family to host/prepare all events and do all the labor. Honestly, she's my hero, but you're here for the story, so here goes. Mom and I go to the supermarket at the busy hours on a weekend because we couldn't make our usual after-school weekday trip when things were less crazy. We go around the whole parking lot twice, as do a row of cars behind us, and we finally managed to nab a disabled spot right by the entrance because someone was leaving as we approached. Now, my mother rarely uses the disabled parking even though she's permitted because she always says people who can't walk, etc., need it more. But again, she's permitted, and there weren't any other spaces. After we park and get out, we hear our car honk a few times, followed by, "Excuse me," as a woman runs up from behind, catching us just before the entrance to the store. This woman literally left her car running in the middle of a busy parking lot, causing a massive pileup. So Karen, that's her name now, catches our attention with her shouting, and when we turn around, we're greeted with her, "Can I speak to the manager?" Haircuts 90s edition, and about half a dozen kids ranging from goth tween to a toddler in her arms. Karen then goes on to explain how the spot my mom just parked in is for disabled people in an accusatory tone. My mom was wearing her prosthetic arm underneath her long-sleeve denim coat, overly big, so the fingertips of her prosthetic were barely visible. So it was a mistake, even though it was a little odd the way she'd abandoned her car and ran up to us with her entire litter. Still, my mom smiles and proclaims, "Don't worry, I'm allowed to park there," and we turned back around. That answer wasn't good enough for Karen. Suddenly, Karen and her kids are in front of us, and she's given the toddler to another one of her children just so she can fold her arms and pout. As you can see, she gestures towards her kids. "I have a lot going on, and I need that spot more than you do. You only have one child." Now, I must have only been 6 or 7, but even I knew the difference between disabled parking and those spaces reserved for parents with small children. I said something along the lines of, "You need a disabled badge to park there. It doesn't matter how many kids you have," in 6 to 7-year-old lingo, and this woman took a major offense. She goes off on a major rant about how being a mother of all her children was hard and how she was having an awful day. SL Monin, and it's not fair that my mom, who looked perfectly fine, had tricked the government into getting a badge that lets her park in a spot that Karen should obviously have instead. As she rambles about this, she looks around, garnering the attention of other shoppers, and is doing that "don't you agree with me?" thing that people do to validate themselves but never give anyone a chance to respond because she was already on to the next person. My mom grabs my hand and tries to leave me around Karen, ignoring her entirely, but Karen keeps stepping in front of my mom, demanding her spot. She's getting increasingly annoyed and loud. I remember asking my mom several times if I did something wrong because my response seemed to have triggered this rant, but she kept reassuring me that I was fine and that I should just ignore her, which annoyed Karen even more. This goes on for about 5 minutes, a very long 5 minutes, before my mom finally snaps. "I have one arm," silencing Karen mid-sentence. I used to wonder why she didn't just tell Karen the specifics earlier, but as I've grown up, I've come to realize that it wasn't anyone else's business, and I can see why my mom wouldn't want to take off her jacket, which is kind of a chore for her, and pop the prosthetic just to prove something. So we begin to walk around Karen again, but barely make it 5T before we hear her go, "B." What happened next is seared into my brain. Karen storms up to my mother and tries to undress her, the denim jacket, and is just shaking my mother and calling her a liar. And my mother goes into full fight to the death mode because physical altercations are obviously more intense and scary for her. She starts scratching, flailing, kicking, and even tries landing a headbutt on Karen. And as she does this, one of Karen's children attempts to jump in and help their mom, which leads to me jumping in to help mine, and suddenly we are brawling with her kids. This couldn't have lasted longer than 30 seconds. It was enough time for people to stop and gather, but not enough for anyone to react. SL put a stop to it. I can't imagine what it must have looked like. 2 women in their 30s fighting as their children do the same by them. But it all came to a stop when somehow Karen manages to yank my mom's denim jacket from her, and off pops her prosthetic with it, crashing to the ground and resulting in a universal gasp that shook the entire parking lot. Okay, exaggeration, but it was definitely a moment. All that's left on my mom's arm at this point is a suction pad and a sharp nail-like hook that slots into the prosthetic. It looks like a blade sticking out of her stub, and without missing a beat, my mom raises it to Karen and in a sarcastic tone goes, "Come on then." I wish I was old enough at the time to realize how hilarious that was. A woman from the crowd that gathered around us stormed into our little fight circle and picked my mom's arm up and handed it to her before going off on Karen, who looked smaller than my 7-year-old me at that point. People started shouting to get security, etc., and Karen rallies her spawn, and they all run for her car. I still remember her kids yelling for her not to leave them because only her oldies could keep up with her running away as the rest trailed behind. My mom was visibly shaken by the incident, but wanted to save face for me in the crowd that was suddenly hounding us. She insists she's fine, she doesn't want to please, doesn't want the fuss, and we go about our shopping. When we got to the checkout about 20 to 30 minutes later, a few of the people that witnessed the whole thing had gathered and insisted they pay for my mom's shopping, which she reluctantly accepted. Then they helped us take all the shopping out to the car, and when we get home, my mom tells me she doesn't want me getting into any fights ever again. Then she lets me have way too many donuts. Here's another story about his mom in the comments. Since everyone seems to love my mom as much as I do now, I just want to share this little unrelated story in the comments. So my mom lost her arm due to playing on the train line when she was a teenager. I won't go into the specifics, but yes, hit by a train, not sucked under, but since flying from what I've been told anyway. After she stopped working, she was restless, so she volunteered for the Cubs group, which in the UK is the younger version of Scouts. Think Boy Scouts in America. She'd often talk about the hazard of playing on and near train lines, and at one point wanted to go around schools and scout groups doing talks about safety, etc., especially seeing as hanging out near the train line was still a thing teens in our town in the 90s. This was still when my mom always wore her prosthetics, so a lot of kids in the Cubs group would argue as to whether or not she actually had a false arm because she always wore that long-sleeve denim jacket. I was constantly hounded about it because kids are stupid and find this stuff interesting. It was never really something my mom addressed. Then it just so happened that the big talk she'd been planning to give that took up the latter half of our Cub meetings also fell around Halloween. Yes, this is going exactly where you think it is. Everyone sits down around my mom and listens for a good 30 to 40 minutes about her experience and what happened to her, the coma, physical therapy, spinal issues she suffered with for a long time, etc. She's hamming it up to make it more interesting. The lights are dim, and she's got generic Halloween creepy music playing on a CD player beside her. But she hasn't mentioned her arm loss, even though a lot of people are mumbling about it loudly. Parents are arriving and standing at the back of the hall waiting, and most of the kids are getting quite restless and rude at this point. Finally, someone asks loudly if my mom really only has one arm, and she responds by reaching into her jacket. She'd purposefully not put the arm in the sleeve and just hidden it under the jacket, and then tears it off and waves it around in the air with a scream. One kid cried, parents got worked up, I died laughing, and my mother was asked never to give a speech again. Now on to the next story. Story 6. My sister-in-law is in love with my husband and has become a serious concern. I believe it's best to uninvite her at our baby shower. Am I the jerk if I uninvite my 32-year-old SIL 30-year-old, I'll call her Tina, from my baby shower because I think she's in love with my husband, 33-year-old, and I met each other at a ski lodge 9 years ago. I was with my young daughter and a female friend and her child. My husband was with his 2 brothers and 3 sisters and a few friends. There was a singing competition, and both of us were set up by our friends to enter it. Sparks flew during our duet, and the rest is history. Back to our first meeting, this was the first time I caught on to my SIL's disturbing behavior. After the singing competition, he and I went to the cafe to chat. His middle sister, Tina, who was adopted at birth, came storming up to us and demanded he come back to their group. She never looked at me and whined when he shut her down. She ran off crying and apparently took her sister's room keycards and locked them out, so they had to stay with the friends in their room. Fast forward to when we bought a house together. We had a housewarming and invited family and close friends. Tina showed up in a sexy club outfit. She ignored me the entire time and hung all over my husband. At the time, she kept recalling tales of them when they were little and how close they were. She'd kiss him on the cheek, hug him, and touch his arm when laughing. He was visibly uncomfortable, so I stepped in. At first, I just thought she had a crush on him, but the way she was acting looked like she was the girlfriend and not me. She was going around reminding/telling everyone that he used to say he never wanted to have kids, but now he's playing daddy to my daughter. One of my friends said she thought Tina was weird for talking about how hot his modeling photos were when he did print work back in college, and that her favorite photo was of them at a beach in Hawaii during a family vacation a few years back. The most bizarre thing she told a few people was that he had never dated a woman of color before, and now all of a sudden he's in love. It's only bizarre to me because she's biracial, so I don't know why this would bother her unless she's jealous of me because she wished she were me. Then things go south at the end of the night when he gets down on one knee and proposes to me. She started crying and ran to the restroom. Their dad went to check on her and then drove her home. I knew exactly why she was upset, but my husband always equated her behavior to jealousy because she never had healthy relationships. After that tantrum, she skipped our wedding, baby shower, our children's birthday parties, and other family events that we attended. I was fine with extending invitations because I knew she wasn't going to show up. She had some sort of mental breakdown and was in and out of treatment for years. Now I have to say I wish nothing but the best for her. And I don't know what kind of issues she's going through, but I don't want her disrupting our peace. I'm currently pregnant, and our baby shower is at the end of this month. I'm having it a few months early because I'm at risk for going into labor early, like I did with my other 2 children. My MIL called to RSVP and stated Tina would be riding with them and if it was okay if she brought her new boyfriend. I was surprised because we hadn't seen her in years, but I was apprehensive to agree. Eventually, I did agree and hope that she resolved whatever caused her so much distress when she was around my family. Well, it took all of 24 hours for her to start her nonsense. She texted my husband paragraphs at 3 a.m. telling him how she felt about our family. First, she went on to say how much she missed them being close and how I came in and destroyed their close relationship when I barely said 50 words to her in 9 years. She asked him if he was happy with his life because, again, he used to say he never wanted kids or to get married. She then asked if he thought about her in all this time and if he could meet up with him before the shower and talk alone face to face. That was the last straw for me. I asked my husband if he knew she was in love with him, and he just shrugged and said he didn't doubt my theory. Apparently, when she was 11, she asked if they could cuddle and kiss, and he said no. He admits her behavior since then has always been weird and dramatic, but he didn't pay her much attention because there were many siblings, and they all hung out all the time. I asked him if he could uninvite her and this new boyfriend because I think she's going to bring drama to our baby shower. He said he wants to talk to his parents first to see what kind of state she's been in, but I know in my gut that she's ready to ruin our day with her theatrics. So am I the jerk for wanting to uninvite her to the baby shower? Edit. For those of you wondering if anything intimate ever happened between them, the answer is no. I am 100% certain of this. He has a total of 3 adopted siblings, 2 F and 1 M. He says he sees them as blood-related siblings because the 3 of them were adopted at birth. He's the second youngest, and they're all within 1 to 4 years of each other, so all he knows them as siblings. He said he chooses to ignore her because she's always been dramatic. He's always worried about her physical safety because she suffered from depression for as long as he can remember, so he tries to handle things gently. He's not opposed to uninviting her, but he does want to know what his parents think about her mental state and whether she can behave. Second edit. So I keep seeing something about High School Musical. I'm a little too old to have watched that show/movie, but didn't know about that plot. I changed some details of how we met so this post wouldn't be immediately recognizable, but it's very much unfortunately my life right now. My husband is on his way home right now despite having another 3 hours left at work because his phone kept blowing up. He didn't sound good on the phone, but he wouldn't tell me what was wrong. I don't want to call back his mom and other sister to ask what's going on, but I'll try to post an update when hopefully we come to a final solution because I'm stressed and over this. Update. This will probably be my last update since my husband and I decided that we need to be completely removed from SIL drama/trauma, so we can focus on having a healthy pregnancy and family life. I have an appointment with a perinatologist, a high-risk prenatal doctor, tomorrow morning that was scheduled weeks ago to check on the baby. Thank you to those who were concerned about me and the baby. So I don't even know where to start, so I apologize if this update seems all over the place. I also have to point out for the person who went through my comment history, I switched the numbers, genders, and event details so I wasn't as easily identified in real life. I have a professional license, so if someone recognized me and thought I was being unethical due to the nature of the post, I've avoided certain verbiage because of my job. I could be brought in for a review which I would much like to avoid, so I'm sorry I can't be 100% truthful with all of the details. I tried my best to keep the most important information as factual as possible. My husband ran home because Tina blew up his phone texting and calling. Now my husband always texts or calls me on his lunch break to check on me, even before the pregnancy, so I knew something was wrong when he didn't. Since he left Tina on read, she started calling and sending a slew of unwarranted and degrading texts about me and our children. So basically, Tina being Tina. He didn't run it by me, but he sent her a long paragraph which he showed me when he got home, basically telling her off and told her that he would rather never speak to her again than listen to her talk bad about our family. He told her she would never be invited to any of our family functions and that she needed to check herself back into the hospital if she thought their sibling relationship was ever closer than it actually was. He closed it by saying he would let the family know the reason she was uninvited, and that he hoped she's either seeing a therapist or would find one immediately. I'm not surprised at his response because the things she said pushed him to that breaking point. I think the worst thing she said was that my 2 miscarriages years ago, which would have been our first child together, was caused because we don't actually belong together, and that my body couldn't even carry any of my children to term, 32 and 33-week deliveries. I expected her to bring something like this up, but I could tell it hurt him, and that's why he didn't hold back from her. He then blocked her and told me he's changing our phone numbers. He called his parents and the oldest/bio sister, whom he is close with, and explained to them why she's never allowed to visit our home. He shared all of their text exchanges and they were mortified. He asked them not to share our address, and when we changed to new numbers, they assured us that none of them shared this information with her because she actually asked for his work schedule and mentioned driving up a day early to surprise him. My FIL had the most to say, and I get it, it's his baby girl, but he hadn't shared much info beforehand with anyone besides his wife. He said he always knew she had a little crush on him, but after her outburst at our housewarming years ago, they had a conversation about her behavior, and she told him that she had been keeping a diary about him since she was a teenager. She explained it was to process her emotions and to challenge negative thoughts. All I heard was that she wrote about him for years, so there's several journals in their home probably enforcing her beliefs. Apparently, she only stayed away from my husband because my FIL kept her in check and was able to get her hospitalized several times for being a threat to herself. I don't know if all her issues stem from her unrequited love for him, typing that just made me nauseous, but I hope she gets the help she desperately needs. He asked that they speak with her about his last text, but that we don't want to know the outcome. They told us they would deal with her and apologized for thinking she had resolved her issues. My in-laws are saints, and I thank them for believing us and keeping her away for all these years. Luckily, she's currently living with them due to her issues, so they're going to speak to her tomorrow morning. The bio-SIL called me when we got off the phone with the in-laws. She told me that she was really sorry because she's the one who hooked the new BF and Tina up and suggested that she show him off at the baby shower, but admitted they had only been dating for like 2 weeks. She said she sent the text Tina sent to my husband to her, the BF, because that's one of her best guy friends, and she wanted to protect him. So I'm pretty sure they're probably not a thing anymore. I'm kind of nervous how Tina will deal with 2 rejections so close together. The 2 sisters aren't that close, and she was audibly disgusted to find out that her sister has been pining for their brother all these years. She has a theory though. She thinks it started with the older bio brother, Sean, because when Tina was little, she would follow Sean around all the time. He's older, so he went off to college abroad. Tina was about 10, and then he permanently moved to Europe. It seems like the crush transferred to my husband when Sean left. Sean hasn't been back to the States since he graduated high school, and no one really has contact with him, so she said she can't call and ask him about it. I have to admit I'm kinda curious and would have been interested in hearing what Sean had to say, but I rest assured knowing our involvement and the whole thing is over. Someone pointed out that Tina is potentially dangerous and could hurt me or our children, and this really scared me. My husband is going to upgrade our alarm system and purchase more cameras. I don't work summers and will most likely be out on bed rest by the time I have to go back to work, so he wanted to ensure the kids and I were safe when he's away from the house. I forgot to mention we live about 5 hours away, so she would really have to go out of her way to show up here, as she somehow found out where we live. So that's it, basically. This will most likely be my only update. I also want to point out for those that think my husband was intimate with her at some point to cause her erratic behavior, if that were the case, she would have loved to throw that in my face over and over. Plus, a guilty man would have tried to silence her a long time ago to keep me from finding out. You don't have to trust him, but I do. Thanks again for all the helpful input. I'm feeling a little more at ease and can't wait to see our closest friends and family at our shower. Update. I've been going back and forth on whether I should post an update. Many of you posted supportive feedback, and some were kind enough to share their experiences with obsessive persons and how I should handle my situation, so it helped me write this update. I included Tina's initial texts after we changed our phone numbers. We were receiving calls from her on our house phone from her work number, but we disconnected it once we found out it was her. I wasn't sure how to organize my thoughts on this post, but I think it will be easier to give an update by listing each person involved. Again, I had to alter some information because of my career and the fear of being doxxed. Tina, It's been quiet for a few weeks because Tina is currently receiving treatment. At first, I thought it was going to be messy because she found out my husband's new number and texted him several times. He ignored the texts and blocked her. Her reaction to this rejection caused issues for her, losing her job, relationship, etc. But ultimately, she is getting help now, and I hope this time she can heal from whatever it is that is keeping her from living a happy life. Sean. Many people speculated that my husband or Sean did something to Tina that caused her obsessive behavior. First, I thought Sean was my husband's biological brother. This was my assumption because he looks like their father in the pictures I've seen in family photo albums, and my husband never referred to any of his siblings as the adopted one, which I love, but it has caused some confusion on my end because only two of them stand out from the others. This is important to mention because it explains Sean's departure from the family. Sean left after high school because he found his birth family in his native country. He searched for his birth parents all senior year of high school and found older siblings. His parents are deceased, but he started visiting his siblings while studying abroad. He became heavily involved with their religion and customs. After college, he cut ties with my husband and his whole family. My in-laws received a few postcards at first, but they haven't had any contact with him in several years. I can't say definitively whether I believe something happened between Sean and Tina, but his departure makes sense, and I can only hope nothing happened. My husband. Again, I want to make it 1000% clear that there's no doubt in my mind that my husband never entertained Tina's obsession. Those who are doubtful, I get it, but respectfully, I trust my husband implicitly. Me, I feel like a weight has been lifted, even if temporarily. My baby shower was amazing, and knowing she was far away getting help allowed me to fully enjoy my friends and family. I'm looking forward to meeting our baby, and I hope we have peace from this situation for a long time to come. Now on to the next story. Story 7. My husband is obsessed with our boss's daughter. I have no idea how to proceed. Throw away account because I don't want people following my main to know about these, at least not yet. For some context, first, I'm 29 and my husband is 34. We work for a small RMG firm. We were both recommended through a relative of mine. I've been working here for about 6 years, my husband for about 7 years. During the work time, our boss would occasionally bring his then teenage daughter to work. She should have been around 15-ish when we first met her and had her interact with the employees and stuff to show her what we were doing, how things work, etc. Fast forward to January of this year, the boss brought her in officially, letting us know that she will be taking over a good deal of his work, overlooking things. We were initially hesitant considering she was so young. She turned 20 this year, but ultimately, she wasn't taking over, more so learning to handle the business while the boss managed other work. I suppose it helped that she herself was also very keen on cooperating and taking advice, often holding meetings to discuss things and making sure she herself is the last to leave work almost every time. There's been an overall good development in that regard. The issue started initially a few months after she started. She would occasionally hold office events just to lighten the mood, and this earned her a lot of praise from all of us since it's not something the old boss would have time to look into. We were all talking about her, so it didn't feel too weird at first when my husband joined in on the praising. How impressive it is she's so young but so mature. How she's been a breath of fresh air in the office. Everyone's so motivated to work because of her, etc. With hindsight, it seems like that was just his in on talking about her. With me in general, every now and then, he'd start singing her praises when we're at home, a huge talking point always being how she's so mature for her age and understanding, even pointing out how we weren't at that age. I didn't take it much to heart until one time I joked that it was fine if he was immature at times and that I would love him regardless. And his response was something along the lines of, "Well, you were too unlike her." I think that was the first time I felt a bit bad because it felt like he actually was just comparing me to her. Now, but I tried not to think too much about it. This slowly spiraled too, going from talking about her maturity to looks, how she can still look good while being so busy with studies and work, how she and I, quote, was definitely more gifted compared to other girls. In once out of insecurity, I asked if he thought she was prettier than me. He gave me "Of course, you're attractive to me, but objectively, like not considering my attraction to you, she is prettier." This messed with me for a while, and we ended up having a fight where I essentially banned him from bringing her up with me if it's not work-related. Also adding to it was the fact that he started taking extra work every now and then and working overtime, and while I initially thought it was to just earn extra money, I later found out it was simply because he knew she usually heads home late too, usually after most, if not all, office employees left. Fast forward to a few days back, the weekend happened. My husband was out with his friends, and my laptop was at the repairs, so I used his laptop without his permission. We are relatively free with each other's devices, like we never have a reason to use each other's devices, but if for some reason we did, the other didn't mind, so I didn't think much of it. I had put on some vids on autoplay as background noise as I did some work when I opened his PC folder, and on the left quick access bar, there was a folder with our boss's daughter's name. I had to click it, and when I did, I actively couldn't believe what I was seeing. A folder of over 1K plus pics of her, screenshots from Instagram and other apps, any and every pic he could find of her, and an insane number of pics just taken without her consent, like with either a hidden camera or his phone at the office, ranging from her just sitting or working to some from a high enough angle to get cleavage or down blouse, and even a few under the table shots, though those didn't have anything to show from what I had seen. This creeped me out beyond anything, since it was almost impossible to place my husband, who I have always known as the sweetest guy for the 6 years we have been married, as someone who would do something like this. I was shocked and just didn't really know how to react. If I should feel disgusted or sad, angry, I didn't know, but then it got worse. I used search to look up her name on his laptop and found something that basically turned any form of sorrow or sadness I would have felt into just pure disgust. He basically had a folder poorly hidden deep in a number of folders, just full of photoshopped pics of her, some solo, some with him, some with other members of the office, and some just absolutely vile and disgusting. I deleted all traces of me having seen or searched for those, though I doubt it was necessary since my husband isn't the most tech-savvy to begin with. I took a pic of some of the things I found and left the laptop. I was furious, but I also didn't want him to know yet, so I acted normal that night, and then the next day I called up my cousin. She was pregnant, and her husband was away, and asked if she needed help and used it as an excuse to move in and help her for a bit. I have talked to my husband, though limited mostly through texts and occasionally at work, but for the last 4 days I've been living with my cousin. Honestly, I am disgusted, but I also don't know what to do exactly. Like, I feel a mixture of being cheated on, which I know he didn't do anything with her, but still, I can't explain it, but on top of that, I feel disgusted that my husband was this sort of a man. But even talking about it to my friends or family feels weird. I tried to share with my cousin, but the embarrassment didn't allow me to say anything. I just don't know what to do right now. I can't stay here forever. I'll have to head back sooner rather than later, but I also don't think I can just go back home and pretend that none of this happened or I didn't see any of this, so I thought this was the best way to stay anonymous and ask for some form of advice. What should I do and how should I progress? Update. So a lot happened in the course of the few hours. I honestly wanted to wait a few more days to cool off myself and then do whatever was needed, but some of the comments did have me worried if he got an idea and deleted everything, if he did something harmful in the meantime, and as my friend pointed out, if he somehow, as unlikely as it might be, found the post and put 2 and 2 together. We ended up going over around 4 p.m. in knowing we'd give a few hours to collect whatever. I made sure to copy everything on the 2 folders to a flash drive and took a video of it being from his laptop too, in case that was something needed. Then, as another comment suggested, we looked for my name, which came out with nothing but regular pics and stuff. After that, my friend asked me to look up coworkers' names, and when I did that, it hit some results with 4 other coworkers' names, all women, but none to the same extent as the boss's daughter. Like, between the downloaded pics, creep shots, and edited pics, all 4 of them combined didn't match hers. All the folders were hidden the same way inside a few layers of new folders, like one folder inside another, etc., up to like 8 to 9 new folders. We took those too. Then my friend pointed out that some of those might be files he received since the file names were different, and some were similar to what WhatsApp files, as she pointed out. This is something I hadn't noticed, but the edited files were definitely named differently, some being the daughter's name plus porn action, and then others just being something like IMG number and then W14 or something along that line, which my friend said our Pixie received in WhatsApp. We confirmed that they were indeed received from WhatsApp and the pic information. This ultimately made me do something that I shouldn't have done since it could have blown up in my face. But it had made me anxious, and I needed answers, so I asked my friends if they would stay till my husband gets back. They agreed, and I decided to take that time to pack my bags, just necessary things for now. My friends did say he's logged into Facebook but didn't want to check his Facebook without me, and by the time they told me that, it was already time for him to come back, so we decided to not do anything. We waited and waited until he finally came back. He was surprised to see us but didn't seem to suspect anything, and I told him to sit down. He did, and I think that's when he noticed his laptop on the couch and asked what was going on. I told him I saw some things related to the boss's daughter and that I wanted an explanation. He tried to get angry at first but quickly dropped that act. I told him I wanted to hear what he had to say and then decide what to do. He said he was fine talking but only if my friends waited in the dining or another room, as he wanted to explain things to me alone. My friends were hesitant, but I told them it's fine and that if they hear any issues to send the drive link to the boss. This was a bluff that I wish I had thought about before he came, but I told him that I saved everything on a G drive and wouldn't hesitate sending it to the boss if he tried anything. He assured me he wouldn't act up and asked me what I wanted to know. At that point, I really wanted to hit him. Just the look on his face, he looked guilty, like he was looking for excuses but failing or something. I don't know, but I really hated it, but I stayed calm and told him I saw a lot of things, including all the pics of her, the edits, and a few other things. I asked him to explain. He kept asking me exactly what I wanted to know, and it was becoming obvious that he was either stalling for an excuse or trying to see how much I knew. I told him finally that I saw the pics, the hidden cam pics, and even the edits. He pleaded with me to not get mad and hear him out, and I told him I'll consider it. He took a minute and told me that he had noticed he was growing more and more attracted to her sexually, and he apparently struggled with these emotions a lot, which is why he did that, and that he wanted to release his tension without harming anyone, which is why he made those and kept it to himself. I then asked to see his WhatsApp, and the color on his face almost drained. He told me I knew he didn't use WhatsApp, but I told him I had checked his Google Play to see what apps he had installed. Another lie, but I was sure he was using WhatsApp, so I still went with it. After a bit, he handed me the phone and told me to not overreact. I took his phone and searched around for a bit. He has a lot of pointless apps downloaded, and it was hard to spot, especially since it wasn't even on the home screen but on a folder file inside the slid screen thingy Android has on the third page. Sorry if the explanation confuses you. I opened it to find just one group chat with 3 other colleagues, members of the team he is in basically, and it was just filled with pics of this girl, creep shots taken from different areas, zoomed in for the most part, from today, like literally a few minutes before he handed me the phone. A lot of conversations in Bangla about fantasies on how they would have sex. Scrolling up, it keeps getting worse and worse. I won't go into details on the specifics, but a lot of it was about wanting to force themselves on her as a revenge on the boss kind of thing, but with her acting as the boss, and some were even full-on, well-thought-out scenarios where they are playing out what they do and what not. If you ever read something and just face pure whiplash, that was me at that moment, literally unable to process it properly. He kept apologizing, telling me he loved me and that this was all just to keep himself in control and that it was ultimately just harmless fantasizing. I only caught bits and pieces of what he was saying before just turning on the screen recorder and scrolling, recording the conversations, and the more I scrolled up, the more vile it got. The conversation did predate my husband joining it, it seemed, but that didn't really matter. He was very actively taking part in it. I got a good chunk of it, but it didn't seem to end, so I simply went to the chat media, and even that was a huge scrolling down of pics, creep shots from phones, fakes, etc. I ended up getting as much as I could and sending it over to me, making sure it saved on my phone. All the while, he kept begging me to forgive him and not ruin his life and career. Sorry, and I quote, "our life and careers." I told him I felt betrayed, and I told him I was disgusted at the man he was, and through his apologizing he kept insisting it didn't really hurt anyone, but I told him it hurt me, and if she found out it would hurt her too, and he simply pleaded with me not to tell her for a while. We just cried for different reasons, I presume, but the entire time he kept switching between how he's sorry and he loves me to how it's not as bad as I'm making it out to be and how they were just messing around online and weren't hurting anyone. My friends checked in on me a few times but didn't interfere. After a while, I pulled myself up and told him that I don't see myself staying with him and that I want a divorce. He pleaded with me not to do so, but I simply said that I didn't want to listen to his excuses. I then told him that I wanted to take the laptop, and he froze. I was half expecting him to reject me, but he simply begged me not to show this to the boss with the daughter. I told him I wasn't sure if I wanted to do that, which was a lie, and that I am thinking it over. I told him not to delete the WhatsApp conversations or tell the others, and that if he does, I will send everything to the boss. Ultimately, I want to talk to the daughter first and then decide what to do and how to tell the father, but that will have to wait. I guess there were a bit more pleading and I simply left it on. I don't know what I want to do. I need to think it over and will let him know and told him to not contact me in the meantime, and that was all we said as we left with his laptop. I do hope he doesn't alert his friends, but even if he did, it wouldn't matter since the screen recording has their names and numbers on the group chat and a huge chunk of the stuff they said. The thing is, since nothing physical happened, I know the police won't take it seriously 90% of the times, with the only possible time they might take it seriously is if the girl herself took action, so I intend to give her all of what I have and let her proceed with whatever actions she chooses to take. I do wish I had waited to talk to lawyers before taking things this far, but the fear and emotions had me wrapped up, and I just ended up taking action. Seems to have worked out, but I don't know. My husband seemed pretty defeated today, but considering how little it feels like I know him, I honestly can't tell with him anymore. I will see how things play out and maybe do one final update, but from my understanding, things will probably just end with a divorce and I'm getting fired. Still, thank you all for the help, even just snapping me into action. When we were leaving, he was basically sobbing and begging for forgiveness or claiming how it's all just a mistake and nothing actually happened, to the point where I almost did feel bad for him, but I don't think I can feel sympathy after those chats and whatnot. My friends luckily were also there to remind me that regardless of what he says, his actions are not for me to forgive right now. I don't really know what to feel. My mind's a bit of a mess, and things are processing weirdly. Apologies in advance if some of this is incoherent or feels like there are blanks in between stuff. Trust me, there are blanks in my head too right now. A few things I did want to specify on the post. Some people took that he's not tech-savvy bit as though he isn't good with tech at all, which isn't the case. I think of tech-savvy as being great with tech, and that's what I meant, that he's not that great, but he is still decent. We work in RMG offices, a lot of our work is with Modas, Photoshop, and Illustrator, and he is decent with them. I just meant that in a sense that he's not the type to hide folders or passcode wall stuff, if that makes sense. Second, the hidden cam was less talking about an actual hidden cam and more just the style of it. Most of those are taken via phone, and as we now found out, multiple phones from different people. Third, some people thought she was a minor. She isn't. She is 20 as of this year, but that still doesn't change the fact that he knew her when she was a minor, and that they started this when she was 19. Fourthly, I've been going back and forth with who to tell exactly, and while she is still young, she is strong, and as much as I hate to say this after hearing it from my husband for so long, she is mature for her age, and as she's directly involved, I think it's only fair I tell her and let her decide who she wants to share these with. I have made attempts to reach out, preferably outside work, and I'll let her decide how she wants to approach everything from her side. Fifth, am I worried about my job too? A bit, for a few reasons. Firstly, because me and my husband were both recommended by my relative, and now all of a sudden, that changes to someone my relative recommended creeping on the boss's daughter. And secondly, because I will be technically the ex-wife of the guy who stalked her to her and the boss, so that's something to worry about too. But regardless, I think it's still the right decision to make. Lastly, about the divorce, I am worried for it for sure, but we don't necessarily have a joint fortune, and most of our finances are our own, with a very small fund saved up that we usually keep for trips and stuff, and I personally think I have enough proof on me too, but still, I will get legal counseling within the next few days, preferably before things blow up on his face. I am currently staying at a friend's for a few days while I look for a new flat. I wanted to move in with my parents for a bit, but my gut is telling me that's the last place I should go once the news breaks. Update. So I think this will be the only update. I saw a few people were asking for updates before too, but I honestly needed some time to myself too and wanted to see how things played out before making an update. So, as I said in the last edit and some of the comments, I ended up going to the boss's daughter, showed her everything I had, and told her I had the laptop too if she needed it. I could tell it was a good bit for her to process initially, but she said she's used to stuff like this. Yeah, I don't give a damn about this place honestly, and so composed herself afterward. She asked if it would be fine for me to help her go through the screenshots and screen recordings and pics since she'd rather not have to go into checking the details herself, and I agreed. We sat at a local food chain and basically wrote out a detailed HR report, like not a report to the HR, but a report from the HR regarding that team. I went over the different aspects of the texts caught on the screen recording, in the edited pics, as well as the creep shots of her. She reassured me that I won't be facing any consequences for this and to leave talking to her father to her. She asked if I were to be called to the police station if I would be willing to go, and I said I would. She concluded that while in other areas this could have been used to better punish them, high chances are that this won't do much other than maybe a few days' worth of jail, but that would still be going to the police, as this will be a good way to make sure if they ever even consider doing something, this could be used to screw them over. As for their jobs, she said she would keep them for a few days while the filing and reports work its way up, then fire them on the spot with no reference or experience certificate, basically rendering any attempts of showing work experience in this company impossible. And should they try, future hirers will be sent the HR report we built. We concluded the meeting there with her telling me to not worry and just not interact with them at work after that. That I spoke to a lawyer, showed him everything I had, and while he took a small bit, said that things can be done relatively easily. The thing is, it's not like me or my husband have that much joint property or wealth that there would be much of a dirty breakup financially, but from the looks of things so far, at least things seem to be going on my favor. My husband did call a few times and texted to see if I would reconsider, but I blocked him. More or less, didn't want any part of his BS, honestly. This is the part where the storm I had mentioned started, calls and messages from relatives, all with the purpose of letting me know that these things happen and that I shouldn't hold it against him. I talked to my mother and found out that what he told her and a few other relatives, including his parents, were, I got jealous because he accidentally showed interest in the boss's daughter but never planned to act on it. This caused almost everyone but his mother to side with him, while his mother called me to apologize, saying she was ashamed of what her son had said. I had originally told my husband I wouldn't blow this out of proportion, but ended up telling my mother and his parents, the former who responded exactly as I thought she would. She told me it's not like he acted on it and that this much is nothing to ruin a marriage over. This didn't surprise me since when one of my aunts got cheated on, she and her other sister had essentially taken the stance of just forgive it and ignore it, move on, and don't bring it up. Things will be happy. My mother and I had a huge back and forth where she brought up family reputation, embarrassment if family finds out what he did, embarrassment if I get a divorce in my 30s. Yeah, that's a thing here sadly, and yeah, 29 is still reaching 30s. We ended the call on pretty bad terms, but it was expected. The family itself is more or less on the same stance, with only some choosing to stay away. And even now, when I ended up sharing the exact reason with a few members, they responded, let it go and fix the relationship, or something akin to that. The pleasant surprise came from telling his parents, though, who took my side after things blew up. His mother apologized to me, telling me she was ashamed of what her son did, while the father told me he will make sure my husband won't be causing any issues for me in the divorce, or in general. I was honestly expecting them to take his side like my family, so this was a welcome surprise. Yesterday, the team were called into the boss's office along with some police. I don't know what was said and done, but they were in there for a long time, and by the time they all left, they just looked defeated, especially my husband. It seems she did exactly what she said she'd do and fired them. I don't know the specifics of it. I don't necessarily intend to ask either. As for me personally, it's been rough. It's easy to get angry when everything is happening. It's the moments when things are calm that memories and feelings get the best of things. But I will be fine. I get to keep my job, which is huge. The whole thing with family isn't getting much better. It seems got a bit worse after the firing. I have my stuff and I have moved in with a friend for a few days while I look for a smaller apartment. As for my husband, I don't exactly know, but I assume he'll be moving in with his parents, who are pretty annoyed with him. The apartment we stayed in was something we both contributed to live in, so without income, I can't see him maintaining it at all. Honestly, this is probably it. I don't really see myself making any more updates to this. It's been a mess. But still, I want to thank everyone for the love and support. It really helped a lot. I haven't really thought out the response too well. Might have missed parts of stuff. If I did, I'll try to answer anything I can, but other than that, this might be it. Edit. It wasn't just over a few pics of her. It was over 1K pics, about 300 or so from social media, and the rest creep shots taken without permission, a bunch of degrading edits and photoshops, a ton of rape roleplay or whatever that was with her as a target of a girl he's known since she was 15. As for ruining his future jobs, that'd be ruined regardless. It's not my doing. Let's say an experience certificate was given. You think any future company wouldn't contact his precious workplace to get a report of him, and you think any HR issues he caused wouldn't be shown to them? In that case, the only way to not ruin his life would be to not go to the boss and his daughter at all, which just seems irresponsible. Anything beyond that is on their hand. Even if I hadn't helped with the report, she could have gotten others to do it. There's no real stopping that. If he was trying to protect me from any embarrassment, he wouldn't have made it into a jealousy thing over nothing. His version of the story just makes it seem like I'm jealous he thinks someone is hot, which caused a good deal of issues here too. As for help, he can get that from his family. The whole rape aspect of it is not something I can just shrug off. As for spilling all the details, every last detail could have been left out of the family, had he not decided to try to play into the fact that I'd rather have not involved family by involving family. His family seems to have a good head on their shoulders. They can get him whatever help he needs if he needs any. With him and I, we're done for good. If there were any chances of fixing things, they're definitely gone now, and that's a huge if. We have reached the end. If you enjoyed this video, please be sure to like and subscribe to the channel for more videos like this, and give us your thoughts about the stories in the comments section. Thank you and see you in the next video.